now cycling is the number one factor of transport, where still is so reliant on the booster.
Okay, let's broaden it beyond London, shall we? I mean, there have been 6 deaths in the last 2 weeks, which is why it's a particular London issue, but it's a national issue.
I mean, it has been horrific what's happened in London, and there's a lot of work being done on the specific causes of each one. But there's a huge amount we can do, and it's really important to get people to cycle and to walk. I mean, I think both of those are really important. You're much healthier if you cycle or walk to school, to work, whatever it might be. They are generally safe things to do. Rather than give a really long answer, we did a big inquiry which I led for the All-Party Cycling Group, where we produced a report called Get Britain Cycling. So if you want the long answer, there are, I think, 18 recommendations there. Because Natasha very kindly agreed to let's have 2 debates. One about a year ago before we did this, one afterwards, and it was incredibly well attended. We managed to get about 100 MPs to come and talk about why we needed to support cycling to make it safer. But the arguments are fantastically clear, that if you get people to cycle and walk more, they are healthier, which saves us money, congestion goes down, people learn better, people work better, it's fun, it's really good. It's just
not about why cycling is about how to make it safe.
So, I mean, as I say, there's lots of details in this report, but some of the key things is to make sure on main routes we have segregated cycle facilities. So not just some paint of any colour on the side of the road, but proper segregation. There's also having slower speed limits, so 20 mile an hour speed limits are really effective. Training car drivers and HGVs in particular to be aware of cycling, making that part of the test makes a big difference. But also about cycle training in schools. I'd like to see every school teaching people how to ride and how to do so safely and legally.
Okay, thank you. Sash.
I had been cycling in London since I'd studied in London, so I started at 18, and 2 years ago I got knocked off my bike, and it was a terrifying experience. I'd never had an accident until then. And so I stopped cycling for 2 years, and I'm just about to start again, but I mean, I've got no confidence, it's absolutely terrible. I think what
terrible time here to start.
I know. I've got put on a stone, that's just vanity. But actually, I grew up in Berlin, and they have got completely separate cycle routes. So you've got the pavement, a cycle route, and then you've got the roads. And I can't see anything other than that really working. In Amsterdam, where they've got a lot of cyclists, they've got so many cyclists that actually it's very difficult for car drivers to use the roads. That might be another answer, is that cyclists just drive car users off the road. But I think actually, the only way to do it is by having separate cycle routes.
Thank you. You a cycler?
I was. It was just sloth that stopped me. I wasn't fearful or anything. And also I'm a great walker, I love to walk. But I think that's part of the issue, because to me it's about an integrated approach to how we get people out of their cars, because that is an issue. Although these latest accidents are all involving big vehicles, buses and lorries, and they are incompatible on the road. And, you can add Copenhagen to the list of cities that has really cycle-friendly places. And I have to say, last time I was in Copenhagen, the cyclists are very polite. And they stop at red lights and they don't kind of harass you. But I think that's part of it's an effect of the relationship between cars and cycles. It's not because I don't think they're inherently more polite people, but because there isn't that contestation between cars and cycles. So therefore, cyclists don't feel they have to take it out on pedestrians on occasion.
Thank you. We've got another question. We've got my hands up there. Let's take this one here on the front.
Hi, my name is Kay Hennessy. I'm a student at Eglinton Secondary School, and I just wanted to put forward about what happened to prison rights. And so in the 18th to 19th century, people who committed a crime went to prison, and they had wooden beds, no mattresses, no toilets, no luxuries like they do now. And basically, the majority of people, I'm not kind of stereotyping here, but the majority of people rob because they've got no money, no house, they've basically got nothing to lose. And they get into prison and they've got these beds, 3 square meals a day, TV, games rooms, and stuff like that. So basically their life is heaven compared to what it was when they were robbing. And on the subject of prison...
Is there a question?
What happens to all the prison rights? I mean, why have they suddenly just got all these luxuries?
Okay. Round of applause. Right, very quickly, let's deal with that. Natasha.
Well, right. I think there's a sort of a difference between when you put people into prison because you want to punish them, and you also put people into prison because you want to rehabilitate them. So you want to use the time that they're in prison to make sure that they don't come back again. And that's one of the really big problems, is that once people go to prison, they go back again and again and again, because in prison what they tend to learn is how to become better at being bad. And I think that if you look at the number of people who go to prison who can't read and write, it's really, really shocking. And it should be that actually when people are in prison, we should be teaching them skills, we should be making sure that when they leave prison they are helped to become better people, that they are helped into jobs, that they're helped into education, because that's what most people who are in prison are: poorly educated and have got very poor skills. And I think that is something that we really need to do if what we want is to make sure that people come out of prison and that they become, that they don't go back again. I think though that I don't think that putting people onto wooden beds with no mattresses and not feeding them properly is a humane thing to do. We live in I think hopefully in a civilised society, so I would want to see as much about having people go to jail because we're punishing them, so we're removing them from society for a certain amount of time. I'd also like to see much more effort going into making sure that we address the problems. A lot of these people are drug addicts, they are alcohol dependent, but mostly to teach people skills so that they can find jobs afterwards.
Okay, I mean, I'm tempted to ask you, but I don't want to put you on the spot, if there's any particular prison you're thinking of that you've seen. Because none of the prisons that I've been into live up to the kind of characterisation that you've presented to us. None of them have wooden slatted beds, but this idea that all prisons are hotels, like luxury hotels, that's not something I'm perfectly willing to. If somebody else has been there, then tell me about it, that's fine. That's not been my experience of going to prison, or indeed talking to offenders. It's much more complicated than an issue of poverty, although that sometimes often does come into it. There's all kinds of factors. So, for example, 50% of young people in young offenders institutions have been in the care system. There are certain factors that we know that are more likely to produce people that become fodder in and out of our prison system. And the real issue for me is, how do we rehabilitate? How do we cut that cycle of reoffending? And again, we know what the issues are. If you give people a job, an opportunity, if you help them with their literacy and their numeracy, if you help them settle into premises and help them give a sense that they've got some kind of family or community around them, then they're much less likely to reoffend. And that's what we've got to be looking at, addressing these issues, which actually in lots of ways aren't that difficult to address. It's just that we've got to develop the will to do it, and also dispel some of these myths about people. Actually, there is a small category of people who do want to go back into prison again and again. That's not because they think it's an easy life, it's because they can't adjust to that life outside, because they become so institutionalised. So I think, yes, we've got to dispel some of the myths, we've got to work much harder to secure the kind of sense of the future for those people that they don't currently have to stop them reoffending.
Thank you. Julie?
I think the Daily Mail and the Sun do often talk about how luxurious prison is, and it doesn't fit with any of the prisons I've been to. I remember one of them where they sort of all prisoners get free Sky access. And I was going shortly after to one of my local prisons, and the guy said, yeah, they're allowed to see the sky. If they look out the window every now and then when they're walking past, they can see the sky. The rest of it just isn't right. And some of the people in prison are there for completely the wrong reasons. There are people who clearly should be there. You do get, as we've said, care leavers, also from people with mental health problems who spend far too much time there. People who are autistic, spectrum, tend to be in there far too often. There's a whole lot of people. And what we know, particularly about short-term prison sentences, is that people who do a short-term sentence are incredibly likely to reoffend afterwards. And partly that's because we're still not very good at dealing with them when they leave. We say, you're now out, go and find a job quickly, having just come out of prison. And amazingly enough, it's quite hard to find a job, so people have no money, so they go back through through
And
the
because
cycle.
they've been in prison,
And because
because
they
people won't
absolutely.
employ them.
And we're trying to get some changes to the Rehabilitation Offenders Act, but that takes some time. I think far fewer people should be in prison, particularly for short-term sentences. There are much better things like restorative justice, where you bring people and you give to talk to the victims. It doesn't work for all crime. There's some way it couldn't be done. Where both parties want to do that, to talk about the damage that was done. And lots of researchers found that reduces reoffending far more than prison. It's cheaper, which is great, but it's also victims prefer it to the person being in jail. So if you have something that's cheaper and more effective and preferred by victims, that strikes me as a much more sensible thing to do. I'd like to see far more of it. Just to tie back into a previous conversation, it's maybe slightly controversial, I think prisoners should be allowed to vote as well. Because when they come out, I want prisoners to be reintegrated into society. I don't want them to see themselves as completely separated, because if they see themselves as separated, they are more likely to reoffend. Let them vote. Many of them won't, but some of them will, and they'll have that chance to think they have a stake in society. That's a deeply uncontroversial position. I think we had a vote on it, and there were 22 MPs on my side and hundreds on the other side.
I'll vote with you.
Fantastic. We'll get it sorted then. But that to me is a much better way of reducing this problem.
Well, it's the innovation of European.
Yeah, European is very clear you can't ban everybody. So it may be that short-term prisoners are allowed to.
Anybody want to talk about this, or all the hands on different topics? Because we haven't really got time for another topic. So if you've got a comment on this, then yeah.
Sorry, it's slightly already.
Well, go on. Just I can't guarantee to put it to the panel.
Just a question on university fees, because I know that that the amount of students have actually gone to university have actually dropped by quite a significant amount. I think about 428,000 have gone to university this year. So I think it's been risen about $9,000. How is it going to change? Will it change?
I'm going to leave that one hanging, I'm afraid, because it's a really, really big one, and we don't have time. Yes, I don't really have time to put anything to the panel unless it's really, really snappy. But I'm going to let you make some comments or raise some questions just hang in the air.
I just want to ask, if we leave the EU, which David Cameron has promised the referendum, how would that impose our daily functioning, our day-to-day life?
I didn't hear the last part. Sorry.
If you left the EU, how would that impact our day-to-day lives?
One word answer.
Has everyone got a one-word answer?
It would be a
One phrase
disaster.
answer. It would be a disaster.
Jobs out the window, economy stalling would be a huge, huge problem. Really, really bad thing to do.
I think the issue is about having a referendum though. I have voted to have a referendum because I think we're now in a position where this issue, everybody is talking about it, but they're not allowed to have a vote on it. So whether they vote yes or no is up to them. But I think it's time that we went back to people and kind of said, look, it's so different now from how it was in 1975. We need to confirm whether or not this is what we want.
And on that note, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you very much indeed for all your questions and all your attention. I hope you enjoyed it.